Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first episode of Adopt a Calling. I'm happy that you all joined in. And if you didn't see the video that I had already posted with the origin story of what this is and what it's all about, just to give you a quick summary here. So, this is a podcast where stories of obedience become invitations. So it's where ordinary people following God's call become the spark that move others to pray, support, and step out in faith. So I'm your host, Sarah. And in every episode, I'll be sitting down with believers from all over the world who've said yes to the call of Christ on their life. So you'll be hearing about their journey, their mission, and what God is doing through them, and how you can come alongside them through your prayer and support. Because when we adopt a calling, we don't just hear their story, we become a part of it. And together, we carry the gospel to the ends of the earth. So let's begin. Today, I have the absolute privilege of having my first guest be someone very dear to my heart. So, my older sister, Rachel, she is a missionary in Athens, Greece. Obviously, you'll be hearing more about that, what she does and everything over there. But it's just such a honor and privilege to have her with me here, being my guinea pig on this first episode. Just a little sideline. If you watch the new video or the first video or not, just know I know nothing about this stuff. I am not good at this. Getting there, I'm going to be better. But just bear with me. First couple episodes might be a little bit rough as I get used to doing all of this. But appreciate you guys, following along. And I appreciate you, Rachel, for for being my guinea pig with this. So thank you so much. So without further ado, Rachel, if you could go ahead and let us know what the name of the organization that you're with is, and what your role is and what you're doing with them.
Sure. So my name is Rachel, and I have been serving in Athens, Greece for 8 years this week. So I am with Greater Europe Mission, or GEM, GEM, and as our name suggests, is focused on reaching Europe with the gospel.
All right.
So,
Yeah, and it is kind of timely. I was thinking about that when we were going to be recording this. I'm like, it's August, so that means her anniversary of being there. So
yes,
8 years.
yes,
Hard to believe that
anniversary.
it's already been 8 years that you've been there. Um, so, I mean, obviously, I know these things, but to share with our listeners, if you could give a little bit of background on, where you're from, like, just a little bit about your testimony on how you came to God.
Sure. Well, I am from Weeki Florida, as your dear host, Sarah. Um, I accepted Christ at a really young age, at 6 years old. And when I was about 11, I made a more serious commitment to my faith, more understanding. And that was tested through my teenage years. But on the other side of it, my faith was a lot stronger. And my journey into missions really started when I was about 16, and I got invited to go on a mission trip overseas. And it's a little bit funny to look back at it now, having been in missions overseas for so many years, because I was not interested at all in even leaving the country. Like, it was not in my mind, not in my plans. And so I wanted to say no when I was first asked to go on the trip. But they said, please just pray about it. And so I can't say no, like, I need to pray about it. And so I did pray about it. And the Lord was very clear, like, hey, you need to go. This is what I have for you. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go. But I really thought it was one and done. I was pretty convinced. I'm going to have my time, I'm going to have my experience, overseas missions, and then I'm good and I'm done. The Lord had other plans. So I arrived, and on this trip, just the first few days I was there, the Lord just totally changed my heart and really my perspective and my understanding of what international missions was. And one of the first nights that we were there, I had the opportunity to pray with another 16-year-old girl, El Salvadorian girl, whose life was worlds apart from my life, but just had tears in her eyes, thanking me for coming all that way to pray with her and to be with her. And that just really affected me. It really stuck with me and just really changed my heart and said, I want to be there. I want to be able to be next to these people
Mm,
that I'm serving. And that was really the start of me wanting to get into missions. So I came back and said, this is what I want to do with my life, having said I never wanted to travel overseas. So maybe in the beginning, people were like, okay, it's a phase, she'll get past it. But I didn't. So I've since then done a lot of mission trips, both short and longer term missions. Went to Bible college to study missions as well, and was just praying and waiting on the Lord to show me the right long term
mm-hmm.
opportunity.
Hashtag Trinity Bible College. What is a couple of the places that you had ended up going on those mission trips? I know you did a couple others that were overseas, like India, I believe was one of them. What was the other one? You were
Yeah,
somewhere for like
yeah,
6 months, like
yeah, that was in
Kosovo.
Kosovo.
That's where it was. Yeah.
hmm And yeah, with a team there. And we did go to India and Brazil while I was in college, just short-term trips. And of course, El Salvador was short-term, but I went many, many times over the
Hmm.
years after that, kept going back. And most recently, before Greece, was serving in Russia and
Hmm.
Alaska. So I was with a mission based in Alaska, but we would do trips in and out and take teams into Russia. So that was where I was before
Yeah.
coming here.
So, if you could help us, like you said, I mean, you had this journey and you were working in the mission before in Alaska. So, what is it that brought you to the current ministry? So, working with Jim, like, and if you could
Mm,
just kind of go into a little bit of like why this ministry and this people, like, what is it that got you there?
yeah, sure. So in all of the places I had served and in all of the places I thought I could go, Europe was not even on my radar, to be honest, up until the point I came. And I think that's because a lot of people tend to think about Europe as
Mm,
already reached and not having that same amount of need as maybe some other parts of the world. The interesting thing is that if you were to Google where is the growth of Christianity in the world today, Europe's not going to be on that list. So you've got the global south, which is Africa, Asia, Latin
mm,
America. The gospel is just exploding. The church is exploding. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But in Europe, you see really the opposite, that Christianity is just shrinking really, really fast. I wasn't aware of that previously. I joined Jim at a time when their current missionaries around Europe were just starting to see that there was a need for ministry specifically focused on migrant
mm-hmm,
populations that were coming into Europe. I came to Greece at that time, really at the height of the refugee crisis in Europe in 2017. At that point, refugees were arriving mainly from Turkey by tens of thousands on rafts and small boats trying to get to Europe. The reason for that was that geographically, where Greece is located, most people coming from the Middle East will hit Turkey, and then Greece and the Greek islands is the first part of Europe that they're going to reach. So even if they wanted to go anywhere else in Europe, the vast majority end up starting in Greece. So that was super overwhelming. And that's not to say that that's not still happening. There are still people coming on boats. There's still a lot of people that die making the crossing. You don't hear about it as much on the news anymore, and the numbers are not
mm-hmm,
what they were back in 2017. But at that time, like 2016, I was just watching the footage on the news from the US, like a lot of people, and just my heart was broken for that, and I was just praying and saying, God, I want to help. I want to get involved and be part of the solution to this, but I
mm-hmm.
don't know how. It's such an overwhelming situation and so far away. So one day I was watching news footage of a man that had been interviewed, and he was in Greece, a refugee man who had tried to make the crossing from Turkey to Greece with his two young daughters. And both of his young daughters drowned during the trip. He was the only one that survived. And they were interviewing this man about his situation, and he said, you know, there's nothing left for us. Like we had to flee our homes, our families, leave everything, and we've lost our souls. And that just like, I tear up every time I think about it, because that phrase just haunted me, you know, like we've lost our
Yeah.
souls. And the more I thought about it, you know, the more I realized, and this is such a God thing that he would do, is that God was using this really horrible situation as this massive opportunity to tell people about a God who could
Mm,
save their souls, you know? And more than that, it's people coming from closed countries. So, I mean, close to the gospel, places like Iran, where Bibles and churches are
right.
literally illegal. You know, I remember being in Sunday school as a little kid and praying for these countries of the world, like, God, please send missionaries to the Middle East or wherever, and praying that God would open the door for missionaries to go in. But instead, we see God was answering all of those prayers for so many years, but not in the way that we thought. You know, he was answering it by bringing them to us and bringing people out from those closed countries rather than opening the door the way we expected. And so then I got really excited and I thought, you know, nobody knows how long this opportunity is going to last. Like, this is incredible what is happening in Europe right now. And so I want to go, you know, I want to be a part of this. And so when I arrived in Greece, I was supposed to be on one of the Greek islands where a really large refugee camp is. People get processed and then go to
Mm.
Athens. But long story short, as often happens in ministry things, it all sort of fell apart at the
Yep.
last minute. And there wasn't a team for me to join, there wasn't going to be support. And so basically, I was offered, do you want us to send you to another country completely where you can do some other type
Oh
of
wow.
refugee work? Or do you want to go to the city and be in Athens? And so, you know, I've been preparing for a year to come to Greece. I'm like, okay, it's a totally different environment, but send me to Athens. At that time, I didn't have anybody else in GEM that was doing refugee ministry. So I was the very first person that they sent as part of this project. So I really had to network on my own, especially this first year. That was great because I met an amazing Greek couple, a pastor and his wife here, who had a Greek run ministry house called the At Home Project. And that's something really rare because, for the most part, I would say 95% at least of the NGOs and things that you will see in Athens working with refugees are not connected with the local
Mm.
people at all. So it's all foreigners coming to do their thing, which is great. They're doing great things, but this was something really different, that it was very grassroots, that it was Greeks themselves trying to reach out and help the
And
people on their
just to
shores.
interrupt you real quick, and you know, I remember you've told me before that it's kind of because the Greek people aren't really as receptive. You know, I think they're, I don't know, a little put off because of all these people that are coming into their country and crowding their streets where they don't really want to help them, right? So that's why this is kind of a rare thing to find Greek people that are actually helping like the refugees in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think that that's definitely part of it. And another part I think is that, I mean, in general, it really was overwhelming. Like, Greece is not a huge country, and to have, you know, tens of thousands of people just showing up, you know, day after day was super overwhelming for
Sure.
anybody. So, you know, even for Greeks who maybe really had a heart to help, it was just,
Mm.
it's overwhelming. And because a lot of Greeks themselves have difficulty finding work. You know, income is not great, taxes are high. You know, people already feel like they're struggling. So it was just sort of like, you know, another layer, you know, another
Mhm.
weight that people feel. But it's good that you brought that up because that reminds me too of this pastor and his wife, who is now my
Vegetables.
pastor, that have this ministry. When I first talked to them, you know, they were telling me about how refugees had just like totally changed their church. because before that, their church had kind of become stagnant. I mean, within the Greek community, people were kind of just, in their own little bubble, little
Mm,
cliques, and they weren't excited about evangelism. They weren't really on fire to do that. But when the biggest refugee camp that was in Athens at one point was just down the street from where the
oh
church is
wow.
now. And when that happened, it was kind of like these people were like literally on the doorsteps of the
Mm,
church members. And so it was just like, how can we not help? So they just kind of spontaneously started bringing food and clothes and things. And so the camp eventually closed down. It wasn't here when I came to Athens, and people had been, relocated. But even so, like they had built such a network of trust with the refugee families who did know them that word kind of spread. And a lot of refugees stayed connected with them and with others from
mm,
that Greek church. And so that kind of is what started it. And so they had then refugees coming in and wanting to be a part of their church, which
wow.
for so long, like there were no foreigners. Like this was just a Greek, Greek church with Greeks. And it was really hard. He talks about how, like, for some people, that was just like they weren't comfortable and they didn't want, other people in there. But over time, it's like you get to know them. Their kids play with your kids. Like, you spend time together. You're all, worshiping the same God. And it just like was transformative for the
Wow.
Greek church. So he says, I thank God for that. God used them to help us, so that's also like a really cool part of what
Yeah,
came
that's
out of
so
that.
beautiful. Such a God thing to take stuff, like even with you, your story kind of reminds me a little bit of like our parents, specifically our mom, because for those who don't know, our parents were missionaries in Tanzania, Africa,
Mhm.
for about 4 years. That's actually where I was born. And so missions has kind of always been in our blood. All of us, we have a younger sister as well. She's been on mission trips. I've been on mission trips. And my mom always jokes around about the fact that when she was praying about it and she was going to school for missions and everything, her and my dad, they actually attended the same college that Rachel attended years later, and how she prayed and she said, God, I'll go anywhere but Africa. And of course, that's where God sent her. So it made me think when you were talking earlier, about, okay, well, I don't want to leave the country. I don't want to do international missions. And then you go on one
Yep,
trip,
yep.
take that step of obedience, and then all these years later, you're living overseas.
Never
Yeah,
say
but
never.
God has his own ways, and he's going to work
Yeah,
things out the way he does. And like you said, he does it in such unexpected ways, better than what we could have planned.
right.
So that's really cool. So,
Hmm.
um, if you could tell us maybe an interesting or like unknown fact about, you know, where you work or the people that you work with, something that people may be like surprised by or maybe not know.
One of the things that comes to my mind is that I think probably a lot of people are like me and maybe think of the Middle East as just kind of this one homogenous blob where everybody's Arab and has the same language and the same culture. I have learned over the years now working with refugees coming from the Middle East how untrue that is, because there are literally thousands of tribal identities within the
Oh,
countries
wow.
of the Middle East. And so there's also really a lot of variety of religions. There's a lot of Yazidi people, there's Zoroastrians, even though a lot of those religions do kind of get steamrolled by Islam in many places, but that's not the first religion of a lot of the peoples in
Wow.
the Middle East. Then you've got so many languages, and within the languages, so many dialects to the point where sometimes people can't understand each other because they have totally different
Wow.
dialects. Even just Arabic, which we kind of think of just this huge, all encompassing language, has so many different versions. And, we've got Afghans who speak Dari, and we've got Iranians who speak Farsi, Persian. Their culture is not Arab at all. Their food, their customs, their holidays, everything is totally
Wow.
distinct from that.
I don't think I
And
could do that.
also, I mean, Yeah, I mean, I didn't before. It's not something that you would just
Mhm.
naturally know if you're not in that world, right? But also, I'm learning about the different refugees that we have and the reasons that people are becoming
Mm,
refugees are really varied too. So, we have refugees right now, especially from Syria, Afghanistan, and Iran are the main places. And the political situations in each of those countries are very different
mm.
from each other, but all still very dangerous for people. And so I think, you don't know what
Right.
you don't know. So if it's something that people are interested in, I'd encourage you to do a deeper dive into that, especially just as a way of praying more specifically for the peoples of the Middle East, and the different situations that people are
Yeah.
facing. So I think that's something that's not really
Okay,
well
very
known.
interesting. Well, I cut you off a little bit earlier, but just kind of going back. So, you got to Greece. You're one of the first people on the ground. You get connected with the church that's already ministering to the refugees and everything there. And then, you had mentioned about the house that they have now. So that was already in place when you got connected to them because of their past of like you said, because they were serving the people and the refugees before you had arrived in Greece, right? So they had the house in
Right,
place
right.
already.
Yeah. So, mhm. So it was still like a little bit after the camp had closed, but before I
Mm-hmm.
came to Greece. So the house that we have for refugees was donated. So it belongs to the Synod of Evangelical Churches within Greece, and it was given for that purpose. So it had been there for maybe a couple of years before I came, maybe like 2015 or so. They had started it. But at that time, it was just kind of the building was sort of falling down around them. I mean, a lot of work had to be done and just a lot of organizing and putting a plan into place because initially it was just kind of like, just
Mm,
chaos, really, but trying to find housing for people. I started getting involved with that project because I saw a lot of value in that and connecting people to the Greek culture. So the whole focus of the at home project is what they call it, and the focus of that was the idea that when you are worrying about where your kids are going to sleep the next night, or you're worrying like if you're going to be safe, your wife's going to be safe while you go
right.
look for a job or something, or where your next meal's coming from, you can't emotionally or mentally go to the next step of what you have to do. You need those basic needs met. And so, like, our idea was if you know that your family has a safe place to sleep at night, then you have the headspace to be able to look at the next
Mm,
step. Like, what's our next
right.
goal? Trying to save money, to get a job, to learn language, to get your documents, to put your kids in school. I mean, just step, 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 all the things that you need to do to be able to be self
Mm-hmm.
supporting. That's like this big chasm that we see with refugees is that there's so many people coming in who are highly skilled, who had owned their own businesses and things in their
Right.
countries. I mean, highly educated people, but they can't do anything when they come here. When if you don't have a place to live, then you can't save up money and you can't support
Mm,
yourself. So that's something that we're trying to address with this project is we feel like if people are given the space to do that and work out their plan, that hopefully they're not going to need that help down the road. They're going to be able to take care of themselves and support their families. And that's really what people want to
right.
do. They're just looking for that opportunity. So that's the idea behind it. But the house itself, I mean, I'm one of the coordinators day to day of the program that we have. So as I said, we have 10 families that live there at any given time. People kind of come and go at different points. But I'm helping to manage the house along with my husband and taking care of maintenance things. That's him, not so much me. Um, and I'm planning activities for the house. We have English language classes for those that are interested. We always have Bible study that's every week. And the cool thing about that is that another part of what we had decided early on was that this wasn't going to be a house just
Right.
for Christians. It was going to be for anybody that was in need. And so anyone that comes, we're very open about why we
Yeah.
do what we do, like who we are. We're not hiding it. We do this because of the
Yeah.
love of Jesus. But we put no pressure on people to come to the church or be
Mhm.
part of the Bible study, um, because we don't want to see people
Yeah.
faking it. And when you're a refugee who's in need, it's very easy to get manipulated like that. It's like, oh, well, I've got to pretend to accept this religion and then they'll
Mm.
help me. And we never wanted it to be
Sure.
like that. So the cool thing though is that because of that, we just tell people, hey, here's the church. We'd love to have you come if you're interested. We have Bible study every week. Come if you want, at the house. And I mean, the majority of the years I have been here, the majority of people in the house of all religions
Mm.
come to Bible study. Like, even if they're very clearly like, hey, I don't believe this, but like, I'm kind
Mhm.
of interested. And partly it's, they are interested because a lot of them, they're coming from countries where you're not allowed to have discussions about religion. Like, you're not allowed to
Wow.
question, what
Kind
the
of
religion
sparks their
is. So
curiosity.
even just the novelty of like, oh, like I can come and like openly discuss
Wow.
religion, is like, it's really interesting to them. And so through that, I mean, we have seen quite a few professions
Mhm.
of faith. Those who've come to accept Christ while they're in the house. We've had several get baptized through the church as well. And even for those that don't, that just move on, we're planting seeds
Exactly.
there. One time we had a man with two daughters, who was not Christian, left not being a Christian, but when he did leave, the last thing he said to us was, I didn't, become a Christian while I was here. I didn't accept this religion, but he said, I will never teach my kids to hate
Mhm.
Christians the way that I was taught
Wow.
when I was a child. That was the last
That's
thing that he told
powerful.
us. And we've had several similar comments made from people. And so I feel like even that is a huge
Mhm.
step. With each encounter with people, you're moving them closer, and that's the goal, like get them closer. And so I feel like at the very least, each of the families that are there that are touched by God's love and the hospitality that the church is willing to show them, and meeting those
Yeah.
practical needs, um, that's moving them toward a more positive view of Christians and
Mm.
Christianity, rather than that distrust that they might feel,
Right.
initially. I guess I would say the tagline that I had for myself when I first came to Greece and I first wanted to start this ministry was, reaching the unreached in reachable
Ooh,
places.
that's good.
And the reason for that was because, yeah, I mean, these are people who are not
Mhm.
accessible. They were not accessible to us. But via migration, they have become
Mm.
accessible. And that's something to really be excited about, despite all the difficulties and all the hardships that brings on so many levels. God's using it. So it's something to
Yeah,
praise
that's
God about.
beautiful. There's a quote that I had read years ago. I think it might have been one of the popes or something that said it, but anyway, it
Love
says,
the book.
preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. And that has always stuck
Words.
with me because I always,
Mhm.
enjoyed ministry that is kind of doing that, where it's like meeting those practical needs, because you could go out there and not that evangelizing and trying to tell people about Jesus, or going door to door, or whatever it is a bad thing. Obviously, there is many people that have been saved in that way, but I think, and I mean, this could be different in different places of the world. I think, especially here in America, you try to tell people about God, and a lot of times they're kind of like, but when you're showing
Mhm.
that love, when you're showing that you care about them, when you're, like you said, when you're providing that either safe place or one of those basic needs that you're helping to fill, I feel like that can be so much more of a ministry, to attest to God's like love and care for them in practical ways. The church that I had gone to years ago, there, when they would go out, they would have like even just like a water bottle handout, and one of their biggest taglines was,
Mhm.
showing God's love in a practical way. And I always loved that because it's just That's sometimes that's what people need
Yeah.
because they're not going to necessarily be receptive if you go and try to just like preach to them. But when you're showing them, in ways that they're loved and cared about, that is definitely something that I feel like a lot of people often have a change of heart in regards to Christianity in that way.
Hmm.
So, all right, awesome. So, let's take a few minutes here. I know that you've kind of talked about, what you're currently doing. I know you're over a lot. You wear a lot of different hats, both you and Human, your husband, which they're newlyweds, by the way. But if you could just talk a little bit about, any current like future plans or goals that you guys have with the ministry right now.
Hmm. Sure. Well, I think maybe like more on a personal level, like some of the things that we're doing right now. I'm the field leader
Mm.
for Gem Greece, which means that I supervise all of the other team members that are here. So whether it's singles, families, couples, and just, be checking in with them, take care of whatever needs they have, and be there to help them thrive in the ministry that they're doing. So that's one of my roles. And one of the goals that I have for this next year is trying to raise up some new leaders. So I've been overseeing the team for several years now, and it's a great problem to have. Our team is really growing. Year on year, we're adding new people to Athens as well as to Lesbos Island, where we now do have a
Ooh.
team, a good sized team, serving there with Greeks as well as refugees. So one of my goals is trying to help bring in some more people, raise up new team members so that the team can continue to grow and expand and everyone have needs covered. The other goal that I have for myself this year is starting to learn Farsi,
Ooh.
which is the Persian language. So, as Sarah mentioned a little bit about my husband, Human, who was himself a refugee, came to Greece, and probably you'll hear his
Oh
story a
yes,
bit more,
we'll have him
maybe in
on
future
here in a
class.
future episode so that he can share about what his story, because his story is amazing, and he is kind of dove into ministry as well. So yes, we'll definitely have him on here to hear about that.
Yeah, so he is Iranian. And so I am starting to try and learn a little bit of that language. Of course, he speaks English fluently, but it's quite different from Greek. So I spent my first 2 years here learning Greek, and I can get by in
She
Greek
speaks
language.
it
But
great.
I
Let me
would,
just tell you guys, when we have gone to visit her in Greece, when we went for her wedding, and when she had been there for 1 year, we family went, and she is amazing. Even at the 1 year mark, she was able to translate for us, read things, everything else. So don't let her put herself down. She can speak it fluently.
well, Farsi is a whole other ball
Yeah.
game from Greek. And so just the little bit that I have started, at least Greek to me, each letter in Greek looks like a letter and it has one sound. But Farsi just looks like chicken scratch, like cursive
Yep.
scribbly together. And, it goes the opposite way on the
Oh,
page
I
than
forgot
how you
about
read
that.
English, which
Yeah.
messes with your mind. And I also had learned that even when they do write in Farsi, they don't use vowels because you're just supposed to know by context which vowels you're going to use. And so that's mind blowing. So apparently, only when you're in preschool and kindergarten, they put the vowels for you to learn them. And after that, they just
Hmm.
don't use them because it's a very, very highly
Hmm.
contextual language. So it's very different, but that's another goal that I have to at least get some basic knowledge to communicate with those that don't speak
Right.
Greek or English. So
Okay.
working on that. Human also, one of his goals is working on theological studies. So he is in his first year of his Master's of Divinity via scholarship with a university he's doing in English. So he's working on that and excited to be learning more about the Bible and how to study, how to share it. And he is also a musician by profession. So we both are part of the worship team at our church. But we'd love for him to be able to get more involved in that way. He'd love to use his music as a way of sharing the gospel in different ways creatively. So we're praying for some more opportunities, on the horizon for him to use
Absolutely.
that maybe in the coming year. So that's a few of the things that we're looking
Awesome.
forward
All
to.
right. And then kind of one of the last things before we, go into closing and everything is if you could share like the three biggest prayer requests, because, the whole heart behind this is that people don't just hear the story and say, oh, that's nice and move on, but that they can actively be participating in your ministry. And one of the biggest ways that they can do that is obviously in praying for you. So if you could just share right now, what's like the three biggest prayer requests that you would have that people could join you in?
Sure. Yeah, I think that is something that's huge. And I mean, I hate that it's sometimes almost cliche for people to say, like, oh yeah, what should you pray for? Because it really is such a huge part of the
Yeah.
ministry here. I mean, I've personally had experiences, and Human has too, where like we knew that people were praying for
Wow.
something specific, or they were praying and they didn't know that they were answering a prayer
Mm.
request until later. So like it's incredible. Like, I absolutely know that we wouldn't be here without prayers of people. So yeah, three biggest requests right now. Um one I would say would be for the Greek people, because I've talked all this time about refugee ministry, and that is kind of where our focus has been. But we are working with and alongside of Greeks and living in the country of Greece. So here, pretty much any Greek that you meet is going to identify as
Mm.
Christian. If you were to ask them, yeah, I'm Christian. Because I was baptized into the Orthodox
Uh,
Church, and I go light a candle on Easter Sunday. I hear the sermon in ancient Greek or Latin, which nobody understands, and then you're basically good. I mean, it is
okay.
essentially what it is. I have met very few people who have any idea that you could have a personal relationship with God.
Wow.
That's so
Wow.
foreign to the concept of Christianity. So people think they are Christians, which makes it hard when you're trying to, connect with someone and evangelize because they think they're good. But a lot of them have never read the Bible for themselves, ever, even though it's widely available here. I think that especially a lot of Greeks from our generation, so like Sarah and I's generation, are functionally
Mm.
atheistic, really. Like they identify as Orthodox because
Mm.
that's cultural, but the way they live their life is really like there is no God. Religion's just a culture
Wow.
title. So the ground is hard. I mean, it's not easy with refugees, but in a different way. With Greeks, it is really hard to get people to want to listen and understand their needs. So I would say, do pray for the Greek people and those who are really laboring, to reach
Sure.
them as well. A second prayer request would be for
Mm.
documents. So I think this is always a request of people in our
Yeah.
part of the world, documents for
Yeah.
something. It's always a need. So the current visa that I've had here for the last 5 years is ending in a couple of months. And I have to leave Greece for an indefinite amount of time because I'm trying for a new visa type now, and we don't know what the outcome will be yet. So also, about my husband, who I had mentioned is Iranian, he's not able to travel to the States with me when I go. So that's also a stress for both of us. Always kind of that possibility of getting separated for long amounts of
Mhm.
time. So it wasn't as big of a problem when it was just me, and if I got stranded somewhere, I could manage it. But now it's more of the, getting
Yeah.
separated. So you can be praying for that. Like it's just I can say at any point in time that you pray for our documents, there's always something.
That's
So
for
whatever the
sure.
document is,
Yeah.
the passport, there's
Yeah.
something in there that you can pray for. Absolutely. And a third prayer request would be, I think for our character,
Mm.
just as believers, we're really in a season of
Mm.
waiting and needing to trust the
Mm.
Lord in a really radical
Sure.
way, I feel like. And just the regular stresses of life in a foreign country can add up, and you add that with just this long list of heartbreaking stories of people and the situations that we are a part of and experiencing in refugee ministry. it just really weighs on you after a while. It kind of it taxes your
Mhm.
patience. And I'm currently doing a Bible study on the fruit of the
Mm.
Spirit. And I have been so convicted of my apparent lack in areas like kindness and long
Mm.
suffering. Like I feel like sometimes I don't have it. And so a prayer request would really be just for Human and I, pray that we would be living up to our
Mm.
calling, and just going deeper and deeper into the Lord's love and grace so that we can then, pour that out to others.
Absolutely.
So just make the most of the time that we
Yeah.
have with people.
I think we could all pray that prayer because all of us have a struggle or a lack in some area of our lives. So, all right. Well, thank you for sharing those. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, we've already talked about the heart behind Adopt a Calling is so that you can hear these stories and you can come alongside them and joining them in prayer. But, another big need for anybody that's in ministry or missions is going to be, financial support as well. So, if you could tell us first how people can keep in touch with you. I know that you have update letters and email and I think a Facebook group. So if you could just go over those ways, so if people, want to be able to keep up
Hmm.
with you and follow along with your journey and what you're doing, how can they keep in touch? And then also, what are the ways that they can donate financially if God puts that on their heart to do so?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So yes, we do have a private Facebook group. Just private because some of the things that we share are requests that are sensitive and it's not information to go out to the public. But that's a very quick way to get sort of short updates from us. So if you are on Facebook, and friends with either Sarah or me, you can request to be in that group. And I use that mainly some pictures and updates, but for quick things like, hey, something's happening today, please pray for this. So kind of, snippets
Hmm.
of things. But we do also send out an email newsletter, usually every 2 or 3 months, which anybody's welcome to join that and be on that list too. And that goes a little bit deeper into more of the stories and what's happening with our ministry. So I'll go ahead and drop my email here, and Sarah, of course, will have it and can pass that on if
Yeah.
someone wants it. But if you're interested to be on the email list or just have another question or you connect with us at all, my email address is rcarlson. So my first initial and then my last name, rcarlson at
Okay.
gemission.com. So if you want
So they could
to
just you
email,
and
we are
say,
happy to
hey,
hear from
put
you.
me on your newsletter list. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And as far as donating, if anyone is interested to donate, that's hugely appreciated. We are 100% donation supported missionaries in our work here. So we raise all of our own funds. And we are currently falling a bit short on our funding for this coming year. The way that you can do that is primarily through Jim's website. So that is gemission.org. If you just Google Jim or Greater Europe Mission, you can find it. And they have a give tab that you can go to for donating, and you can look me up by name. Even if you just put Rachel, it'll give you all the Rachels or something like that, and you should be able to find a link to Human and I's specific page on there. They were able to give that way, but there is also a physical address on the website for Gem if you want to send a
Okay.
check and not do it online. There's also a way to
Okay,
do that.
great.
So
Yeah, and like she said too, when this gets posted, we're going to have the different links and email addresses, anything that you need to get in touch with them. And, for anybody who does know me or my family and stuff personally, and you're not a part of that, you can reach out to me directly, and I'd love to get you connected with them. So, all right. Well, thank you. This has been amazing. I feel like even though she's my sister and obviously I know about the stuff that's going on, I feel like I still learn things every time I get to hear her speak or talk. It's always so amazing to hear what God is doing, both in and through her and the missionaries that are there. And I'm just so proud of you, Rachel. I couldn't be more proud to have you as my sister and to see all the things that you've done and how far you've come with everything that you're doing. So, just to wrap up, guys, again, I want to thank you for joining us on this first episode of Adopt a Calling. So, again, if something in this story has stirred your heart, don't let it stop here. Pray, reach out, share this episode with someone, that needs to hear it, or just share it in general. Maybe someone doesn't know that they need to hear it. And if you do feel led to support Rachel and Human and their ministry there, or just to learn more, again, you'll find all the links in the notes. So, until next time, guys, just one thing I would say is don't forget that kingdom work is not reserved for just a chosen few. Every one of us has a part to play in what God is building, because together we are the body of Christ. So through listening, through praying, through giving, you're not just observing, you are participating. So you might be here and she's there, or whoever's over there, but you are participating. This is the heart of Adopt a Calling. It's about ordinary people with eternal purpose that are just saying yes and walking through that, and you get the opportunity to come alongside them and be a part of it. So thank you, guys. God bless you, and we will see you next time. Thank you again, Rachel, for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right.